So much for joining us. I'm your online education chair for NAGAP, and I'm really excited to have Josh Lefebvre and Bobby Detweiler and Rick Garcia with us today from the research committee within NAGAP, and they do a wealth of research related now, of course, to graduate enrollment management. And one of the favorite things that a lot of our members like to hear about is the trends in salaries for many of our members. So that salary survey went out earlier this year, and I'll let Josh tell you a little bit more about that, and this gives you an opportunity just to hear a little bit more about what came out of those survey results. I do want to put in a quick plug that we will have a number of other webinars coming up. Our next one will be on July 12th. This will be a partnership with NAGAP and Marymount University and Direct Development. Many of you are familiar with Tony Fraga from Direct Development, and they'll be doing a follow-up presentation on the integrated marketing session that they did at the annual conference in Orlando. And then we'll have another a series of webinars coming up in August and September with some of our vendor partners from Platform, and we'll also have Carnegie Communications presenting on stealth applicants. So be sure to watch your email for all the details on that, and we'd love to have you join us. And for now, they're all going to be free for everybody, so be sure to join us for each of those throughout the summer. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Josh and let him get started.
Great. Thank you very much, Marcus, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone that's joining us today. We're thrilled that you're here and look forward to sharing with you some information on the 2012 or biannual salary survey. But first, I just want to say, again, thank you for joining us, but more importantly, thank you for the time that you took in completing this survey. And any survey or any outreach that the Research and Global Issues Committee does, as you've probably seen throughout the past year, we've been a very busy committee. We have many projects on the go right now. This one, in addition to the NAGAP 360 you might remember filling out, as well as the defining and adapting and adjusting graduate enrollment management. So we're very busy, and we're only as successful as the committee members and also the members of NAGAP that contribute. So thank you for all that you do to help us help you, basically. So today, what we're going to do is provide you with some preliminary findings and also just some descriptive statistics related to the salary survey. Before we jump into this, just one thing to stand out here is that this is just an hour's worth or less, actually, of information. There's going to be a lot more information as the committee works to create a full report for the members. So a lot of the things you see here will be either more detail as we get into completing that report, which we will have published at some point in the summer. So thank you for all of that. Just to quickly introduce our panel, the members that will be joining me today, a couple of the members of the NAGAP Research Committee, Mr. Robert Detweiler, Director of Academic Advising at Lourdes University in Ohio. We have Rick Garcia, Assistant Director, Office of Graduate Admissions at the University of Southern California. And of course, I'm more on the other end of the country here in Potsdam, New York. And again, thanks to two of our committee members for all of their hard work on this. They'll be leading the majority of the conversation here. I'd just like to thank them for their time, their skills, and their talent in helping us to provide information to you, our members. So today, we just wanted to cover a little bit about the purpose and the goals of this particular survey that has been done for some time now, the methodology related to the survey as we constructed it and delivered it, an overview of respondents. We have several hypotheses that we've tested that we'll be kind of going through with you, as well as some factors predicting gross salary, some of the deeper analysis that we have done with some of the information that was provided. We have a couple other notable findings that we hope to share with you today, and all of that really kind of being, the summary being the point where we close, and we'll take questions that you might have at the end. And a lot of the questions that you come up with today will also help us kind of drive the report that we might create for you as well. So as far as the purpose, we thought that it was very important for us to have a purpose statement, so it kind of drives everything that we do as we looked at the survey. So the purpose of the project was to collect data to determine whether differences in salary distributions exist. If they were found to exist, then the next step is for us to identify the nature of the differences. So we'll continue to do that deeper analysis in the reporting as well, but give you a sense for really the direction that our committee was headed in when we were doing this. So again, just to kind of break it down for you a little bit further, disseminate our descriptive statistics for benchmarking, collect information specific to salary, the profession, and demographics, analyze factors that influence the salary, and then test the hypothesis of these distributions by various factors. So for methodology, again, just to kind of bring this back, in last December when we had launched, we actually closed it, I believe, the end of January. We extended it a little bit, but we had all NAGAP members invited to participate in the survey. It was sent out to 1,578 active members. The deadline, again, was extended into January. A total of 591 members completed the survey, which is 37%. But we have active members, and it was up 5% from the previous survey, so very good data size for us to be able to use. And even better than that, we had a total of 664 members who started the survey. So we had a respondent completion rate of 89%, which we felt was very strong. We also wanted to make sure to identify some of the limitations of our study so that you were aware as to some of the decisions that we might have made as we did the analysis. But again, some of the basic limitations that not everybody in the profession, this is limited to respondents. So it's limited not just to NAGAP, but just to the membership that participated. Of course, with many analysis and a lot of research out there, there's always some issue with, how do you pin down one universal method in identifying the distributions in racial constructs? So we definitely identified that, the method that we might use is not one that another would use. And in some cases, percentages in the analysis don't have to 100%. There are some data points that we do exclude in the results, and I'm sure that'll be addressed in some of the conversations that we'll have. And one other one that was asking for salary and ranges over exact dollar amounts. We still provided some great information, but of course we identified that that could potentially be a limitation to certain areas of the study. So I'm just going to share a little bit about the respondents, just to give you a kind of a perspective of where people were responding from and the types of institutions. So this is just a breakdown by state, with the largest being in New York, then the second largest in California, of course, going throughout most of the country, and one sole respondent from Alaska, so we thank you very much, whoever you are. And 54 respondents did actually leave this blank in terms of their location. As far as the type of institutions, this was a 639 was our end number for this particular question. And we had a little over half from the private nonprofits. And then, of course, you can see the breakdown of the other areas as well. Looking at population of graduate programs, if you will, or graduate student population and responses, again, similar, and whereas you see most of our responses come from institutions that have less than 3,000 members within their population. Again, looking a little bit about the types of institutions, we had a little over 53% responding from urban. Rural was the lowest, and then, of course, suburban. And you can see down there we did have 20 that skipped that response. And I think Rick will also mention a little bit about some of the responses and correlations with this particular question as well. Salary responses by range, again, just kind of taking another look a little bit different as far as the range of salaries and the types and overall respondents. And this is a good kind of correlation when we get into titles in terms of the breakdown of our responses, with the highest being around the $50,000 to $59,000 mark. And if we wind up going a little too fast through this, we do apologize. A lot of content to try and cover. Of course, this will be available recorded, and we're happy to take questions at the end as well. So the last piece here before I hand this over to Rick talks a little bit about responses by title. And this is condensed a little bit in the sense that we combined vice, associate, or assistant presidents, dean, associate, and assistant deans. and so on as we felt appropriate for this particular visual here. But director was the highest response rate at 212, or a little over 37% of respondents responding to be in a director position. So we take a look at that conversely as far as responses and compare that to salary. And we'll talk a little bit more about conversion charts and as well. But the last thing that we wanted to do is in terms of showing you kind of a 5,000-foot view of the titles represented compared with salary. In order to do this successfully, converting the way that responses came in with an actual conversion chart, we took average means and assigned numbers to those means. So when you see in this chart 3.84, at the end of this presentation we'll show you we did a conversion on those as associated with average salaries. So this shows a little bit of the progression as it relates to those means and what those would translate to into salaries. So what you're looking at in this particular chart, manager and associate coordinator are relatively close in means, representing that perhaps there's some correlation with responsibilities and what that particular title or position does. Obviously, you might find your title on here, and some of you might not find your title on here. There were significant responses of other. We did try to incorporate that as best as possible. So as you can see on the right, as far as just a quick conversion, the numbers that you see on each data point and their associated average salaries. And again, we'll show that to you towards the end. And I'll leave this up for just a few more minutes before handing that over to Rick. So you can get a sense a little bit about how that plotted out on the graph by title. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Rick, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the analysis that he did as it relates to certain hypotheses, and I'll try to keep up with you in the slides, Rick. So, Rick Garcia, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Josh, and thank you, NAGAP members, for being here this morning or this afternoon from wherever you are. I'm happy to share with you that I am actually calling into this wonderful webinar from beautiful downtown Las Vegas, and so I plan on celebrating this project immediately after this presentation. So if we can go to the next slide here, we'll launch right into our descriptive statistic analysis. And we'll share with you that we wanted to test actually 7 hypotheses related to categorical variables and mean salary distributions to determine whether there were actually going to be significant levels of differences in the different subpopulations that we identified in the salary survey design. And so you can see the first 5 here. And what I mean when I say significant difference is the difference in the average salary a function of what we would expect to see by chance, or is there something underlying, some structure that is making the salary go up or go down? So I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence, but I want to make sure that everyone's on board when I explain what significance means, if that's what it actually means. So next slide, you can see the last 2 hypotheses that we're going to test, and the subsequent slides will actually go into that in much more detail going forward. So in our first hypothesis, we wanted to take a look at our international membership, and we found in our survey sample that we had 119 respondents, and we wanted to determine whether our international members' salaries were different than our domestic members' salaries. And so to do that, we used an independent samples t-test, where we determined that were tiny differences in the mean salaries, with international members reporting slightly higher salaries. But these differences were not statistically significant. That means that the observed differences were expected as a function of chance, and there was no underlying structure that could be used to explain why they were making slightly more. Next slide. So here you can see the distribution of reported salary ranges for our members. The mean salary for this group was approximately $56,500 US, and the salaries are fairly normal in terms of distribution with just a slight negative skewness. And by that, if you look at the left-hand side of that graph, you can see where the values are pretty low in terms of numbers of responses, and then it bulges over towards the right. That's what we call negative skewness, and that just means that the values tended to go towards the mean and beyond. Next slide. So hypothesis 2 was that there was no significant difference in mean salary as a function of racial or ethnic self-identification. And as you can see that there is a large interval between the largest and the second largest groups in the sample. And that just goes to the overall composition of, one, NAGAP's membership, and two, the people who decided to participate in the survey. So we use what's called a one-way analysis of variance, or an ANOVA, to determine whether there were significant differences in mean salaries, and we found no significant difference at this level. We used a secondary analysis called eta squared, which is really just a measure of the effect size, and found that in this sample, race had little to no effect on salary distribution. And this finding was subsequently informed in our regression model that Bobby will talk about. Next slide. So this table, and the one on the next slide, it's just a more visual representation of it. It's intended to give you a sense of the scale of the mean salaries in our sample, while also allowing you to make quick side-by-side comparisons of salary averages. Just note that the dollar values are only approximations based on the conversion chart that Josh had mentioned earlier. We recognized during our analysis that one of the design limitations was opting for respondents to provide their salary range instead of asking for a direct input of salary, which resulted in some coding issues. So any of you who have ever done survey design or research design know that when you run SPSS, you need to code things a certain way, and in this way, because we used ranges instead of direct inputs, we had to code it. And so it resulted in a slight watering down of the averages, but you get an overall sense. And so any of you mathematicians out there looking at these mean salaries, adding them up, you'll immediately notice they don't average out properly. And that's just because of the design problem. But you can get a good sense of how it breaks down. This is a visual representation of it. And again, you'll see how the different racial ethnic categories stacked up, and pretty much statistically we would describe this as just a flat distribution. You can see that once you get to $60,000, it pretty much evens out with the exception of Native Americans. We only had, I think, 1 or 2 respondents in that category. Next slide. So our third hypothesis assumed that there was no difference in mean salary as a function of age. And here you can see the distribution of members' ages. And I would like you to notice the larger peak on the left of the curve and then the smaller peak on the right. And here we have evidence of a slightly bimodal distribution in our age frequencies, which will come up later in our findings from the regression analysis. Next slide. So here you can see what the mean modal ages are for the sample. We used Pearson product moment correlation, or just a correlational analysis. We were trying to determine whether there is a relationship between age and salary levels. This technique allows us to compare 2 or more variables that are on continuous scales, which contrasts with a t-test or ANOVA, which allow us to use categorical variables and 2 or more continuous variables. Our analysis on this note revealed a moderate correlation between age and salary. When we disaggregated by age by gender, it revealed a moderate correlation between age and salary for females, and a moderate to large correlation between the same for males, which meant that males, the older they got, the more they made, whereas females, the older they got, they made just a little bit less than males. Next slide. So our fourth hypothesis assumed that there was no difference in the mean salaries as a function of academic qualification or highest degree earned. Here you can see that on average, NAGAP members hold a master's degree, which is a good thing considering we're in the business of convincing folks to pursue advanced degrees. We conducted another ANOVA to test our hypothesis and found a significant difference in mean salaries. Academic qualification exerted a strong effect on salary and explains about 15% of the variance in salary produced by degree earned. Next slide. And so here you can see the frequencies of earned degrees in the sample, and you can note that only 14 respondents indicated having earned a high school diploma compared to 152 respondents having earned a bachelor's degree, which takes us to our next slide where I want to comment briefly on this finding. So when you look at this graph, you're going to see what looks to be a fairly linear relationship between degree earned and salary level, with just a slight dip at the master's and professional master's level, which could be an artifact of a poor design because we conflated two separate degree types. But the interesting part is over there on the left side with the high school diploma. And this finding is contrary to the narrative that we tend to tell folks that qualifications earned beyond high school tend to yield larger average salaries. If we strip away the high school diploma qualification from our analysis, we're actually left with a very nice linear relationship between qualifications and salary. But we wanted to try and understand this, so I dove into it a bit deeper and came up with a few explanations. The first of which is that there were only 14 responses indicating that the respondent's highest degree was a high school diploma. This means that even a small increase in salary numbers exerts an actually large effect on the average salary as a whole. And there was one respondent in the sample with a high school diploma that reported earning a salary of $100,000. So it doesn't take much to drive that small average up. Second, looking at how these respondents worked at their current institutions, or how long they worked there, we find that 5 worked at their current school for 20 or more years, and 4 have been there for around 16 to 20 years. Lastly, we found that 4 folks reported having worked in their current position for between 11 and 15 years. And so it seems there's more to the story of salary than just degrees earned, and it may be in what we end up, you'll see in the regression analysis, is that how long you work somewhere and how long you're in the profession actually exerts a pretty good effect on your average salary. Next slide. Our fifth hypothesis assumed that there was no significant difference in mean salaries as a function of gender identification. One of the things that we thought in the survey design was, well, males and females, there's probably going to be a difference there. So you can see how our sample breaks down by gender. And we also included a category for transgendered responses, but no one responded in that domain, so we omitted that from our analysis. Next slide. So to test the hypothesis between gender and mean salary, we conducted another independent samples t-test to compare the mean salaries for males and females, and we found a significant difference in mean salaries with females, mean salary being approximately $52,100, and males' mean salary being approximately $63,300. So the difference between the means being about $11,200. Next slide. So if we go back to academic qualification earned and we look at that based on gender, we can see our males and females in the sample, and you can see that the difference in master's degree between males and females just kind of jumps off the page and almost off the charts. Females earn 2 master's degrees for every 1 master's earned by males. Females also earn 5 times as many bachelor's degrees as males in this sample. And this data is consistent with other literature that has shown that females earn baccalaureate and postgraduate degrees with more frequency than males. And there's a nice table at the Integrated Post-Secondary Educational Database, IPEDS. It's table 35, and I can furnish the link upon request. But just wanted to point that out. Next slide. So our sixth hypothesis assumed that there was no significant difference in mean salaries as a function of years served in graduate enrollment management. We used another ANOVA to determine the relationship and found a significant difference in mean salaries with increased salary levels corresponding to more years spent in the profession. The effect of years of service on salary was found to be large and accounts for about 28% of the observed variance in mean salaries. Next slide. So here's a visualization for you that reveals a very good linear relationship between years in enrollment management in the enrollment management profession and salary. And when I did just a secondary correlational analysis, we actually found a very strong correlation between years of service and salary. The row value for you statisticians out there was 0.52 with 623 respondents, and the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis was 0.01. So that means 99% of the time we're going to be right, that there is this strong relationship between these two variables. Next slide. So that concludes our hypothesis testing and the first part of the salary survey data analysis. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague and excellent teammate, Dr. Robert Detweiler.
Thanks, Rick. Wanted to thank Rick and Josh for their incredible feedback and input as part of this process. I was on the Research and Global Issues Committee 2 years ago when we did this survey, and I think where the committee and the three of us really saw this heading is, we have a lot of descriptive statistics, but we wanted to take it a little step further and figure out, with a regression analysis and with some separate ANOVA tests that Rick's already talked about, what kind of additional information we might be able to glean from the results and give you, our membership, a lot more information to take back to your campuses and to take to your supervisors, and for you to know also for your professional development. So we have a lot of really great results here. So Josh, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, we'll get into it. What I did, I used a blocked form of multiple stepwise regression, and I took a look, and it is somewhat subjective, but I put all of the variables and all the questions, every one from the survey, into 6 separate blocks. The first block that I entered was inputs such as race, ethnicity, gender, and age. That doesn't explain every variable in every one of the blocks, but this gives you an idea of kind of where we were going. Block 2 for employment characteristics. Block 3 were all those kinds of things that the employment gives us in terms of number of vacation days, whether tenure is an option for you as a professional staff person or for our faculty respondents, and so on. What I did also to test the strength of this model is that I entered all of the variables without block. I just threw everything into SPSS at one time, and then I mixed up the order of the blocks. And in every case that I tried to see if the order would make a difference, it did not. The results were the same regardless of whether block 1 was entered first or if block 2 was entered first. So the results are strong from the methodology side, that no matter how you put this into the regression analysis, the results were the same. Next slide. What we found were we had 14 predictor variables that were shown to be significant predictors. And then this model explains more than 61% of the variance in that criterion variable, which is what is your average salary per year. So for those of you who have taken statistics courses, 61% is a very strong model, and I was quite thrilled to see how much variance was explained by these variables. Now, this doesn't mean that any other of the variables, like whether you're an international member or your race, there might be some differences, and that these factors do add up to maybe increase the variance. So if you really include everything that was thrown into this analysis, let's say that the variance might be up towards 70%. But the 61% only explains those factors that were found to be statistically significant at the 0.05 level or stronger. Next slide, Josh. So we'll get into a little bit more discussion, but these give you an idea of all the variables that were found to be significant predictors of salary. Rick's already talked about a number of these, including age, gender, the number of years in enrollment management, degree, and so on. But there are some new things here that Rick hasn't been able to talk about, which is why we wanted to go into the regression analysis. Things like the number of people you supervise in your position, the size of the graduate student population at your institution, for one particular area of vacation days, the size of the budget that you control, how much funds are available, so the size of your budget in addition to the amount of control you exert over your budget. Those are two separate questions. Are employees at your institution working in a labor union? How much was your most recent salary increase? If your salary has been frozen, how long has it been frozen? And whether you believe your supervisor works with you to improve your performance. All these factors were found to be significant predictors. Next slide. So some of the things that we wanted to tease out here and spend some time discussing were that men earned more statistically than women. Rick's already talked about that. And older workers do earn more than younger workers. And we saw that through, especially with the years of experience, the chart seeing a positive increase over time. What we found 2 years ago, and this was a significant change from the previous salary survey results. In 2010, I found that there was that there was really no difference in salary between white respondents and minority respondents, which was a change again from what we had seen before. But what we wanted to do this year was take that a little bit deeper and to say, not just based off of descriptive statistics, but is there a statistically significant difference? And there wasn't, and that was very positive to find. But yet there still is obviously a difference that still exists on gender between men and women. Next slide. So these are the factors, and you'll see those that are positive and those that are negative. Again, much more details on the statistics and the methodology will be found in the final report that we'll publish this summer, but I wanted to give you an idea, just real top level, what are the significant factors. The number in the parentheses is the rank order. So the strongest factor in terms of beta weight strength, the strongest factor of your salary is the number of people you supervise in your position. And that's a positive predictor, meaning that the more people you supervise, the higher your salary. Also, and on that side of the page, you'll see like the highest academic degree. The more advanced degrees you earn, the higher your salary. If you control more money in your budget, then you'll also see a salary increase. And then the negative predictors. Now, the budget control and other things seem a little bit confusing, and I wanted to explain that a little bit. With your budget control, the question was worded, what level of control do you have over your budget? And the first answer was coded as, I have full control over my budget. Then number 2 was, I have semi-control. The third one says, I have no control. So as the answers leaned more towards, I have full control of my budget, that is indicating that there's a higher salary. So with some of this may seem a little bit confusing, and that's why we have a full-blown detailed analysis and an explanation of all the findings in the final report that will hopefully give you some more information. The one thing I did wanted to point out is that the top 10 factors that predict gross salary were all significant at the 0.001 level, indicating a very, very strong prediction that if you supervise a number of people, if you have budget control, and if you feel that your salary matches your performance level, those are all very, very strong predictors of what your salary is going to be. Josh, can you go to the next slide? The one thing I really wanted to talk about before I hand it back over to Josh is, what does this matter to you? I mean, so what can you do? What are the implications for all of you in trying to seek out stronger salaries or higher salaries, increase your position, increase your level of responsibility? What can you do today? Obviously, you've seen that there is a strong relationship between your degree level and your salary, so the recommendation is to seek advanced degrees, gain more education. Leaders or readers, and those who increase the amount of information that you know, is definitely a significant predictor. If you have supervisory control over employees, that would definitely help you. And if you do not have that, then we would encourage you to try and seek out some sort of supervisory and budget control, either if that's supervising the performance of your graduate assistants, or if you can supervise the performance of your administrative assistant or secretary at the front desk, or other full-time permanent staff. This could be a really great way for you to gain that experience. One of the difficult things is there is still a catch-22 that you can't supervise people until you get into a director-level position. So it is tough, and you might have to seek those creative ways, and again, looking at student workers and graduate assistants as a way to gain that experience. Institutions that have larger graduate and professional student populations have more money to work with, typically. So that could be something that you may want to investigate, is to move to a different institution with a larger budget, and they may just have more resources, such as being able to offer cost of living increases. Another thing that was an interesting finding in the results is that there is no statistically significant difference in the institutional location on urban, rural, or suburban, and that public and private institutions, there were no statistically significant differences. That doesn't mean that there aren't any differences in salary and that public institutions may offer higher salaries, but again, that there is no statistically significant difference. So we'll be able to give you those results again in the full-blown report that we issue in the summer. And one last thing is that there is what you saw, a difference in salary among the years involved in enrollment management. That the number of years you work in enrollment management is a significant predictor, but the number of years you work in higher education as a whole is not a significant predictor. And this would make sense because those people who have worked in, let's say, alumni affairs or in student affairs, and they've made their way into the graduate enrollment management profession, they're coming in with a different set of experience, and they may have to start out at that entry-level salary to move their way up a separate career ladder. So for all of those of you who are here and will be watching later that are looking to increase your salary, it appears to us that the number of years you work in this narrow field makes a difference, and you wouldn't be able to go to a VP of advancement position and gain that salary without the years of experience in advancement. So it's something you may want to consider if you're looking to move to a different institution or move into a different area of enrollment or higher education in general at your current institution, then that you may have to basically reset your career ladder and move up into further positions, but that depends on the number of options that are available to you in that new role. So that is it for my section, I believe. And Josh, can you go to the next slide? Yep, and I'll give it back to Josh.
Great, thank you very much, Bobby and Rick. I appreciate all of your sharing of your findings. And you know, one of the things I had noted here is, you know, a lot of times we have conversations about salary and about, you know, the gaps or the differences in gender and whatnot. And while there's a lot of assumptions that we make and say, oh yes, you know, women always make less, or you know, you have to have a master's degree to move up, it's nice to have some statistical, you know, reporting behind it, and especially doing this from the perspective of our membership and not necessarily more of a macro kind of assumption. So all of these things that we've kind of been trying to give you a broader perspective of will again be in that report. You know, looking a little bit more at the descriptive statistics, looking at the full reports that both Bobby and Rick put together with their regressions and with their with the other findings that they were presenting on today, looking at geographic breakdowns and all of the different things that we think would be important for you, not only in terms of understanding where you fit within the broad scheme of things, but also giving you some information that you can use when you're researching and preparing for your next move, or within either your own institution or elsewhere. So you know, we want to make sure that we provide a little bit of time for about 15 minutes for questions. So I just had a few other slides that we thought would be good to share for the purpose of this webinar, and of course other things in more detail in the report this summer. But as far as other notable findings, we put a couple slides in here that talk a little bit about you know, cost of living, but also it's, you know, as far as what percentage of it is based, how is it based. And a lot of times I've run into people at either NAGAP conferences or on the phone, asking questions related to salary freezes. I know especially with the recession, a lot of economic issues, and especially the institutions have had to face a lot of shoring up their budgets for certain things. Getting a sense for our members in terms of where are they with any raises, or if it's been frozen, how long has it been frozen. So just a couple slides here to share that. As far as cost of living, still the majority of members are every year. However, we've noticed that the numbers continue to grow, and sporadically as well as rarely, as far as the cost of living adjustments. While there might be other types of adjustments, either based on merit or a permanent appointment or whatnot, it was interesting that a little over 30% reported rarely for cost of living increases. So if you've been wondering, you're not alone by quite a bit, as you can see here. In addition to that, we asked about the salary increase as a percentage of base salary, and I think the majority of people, it is between 2 and 5%, over half actually saying that, which does seem to kind of make sense with anyone that you've been talking with, and just over the course of time, that has been about right. But we noticed a relatively large percentage of under 2% as far as any kind of annual increases with cost of living. So in our analysis, looking at types of things with other national reporting on cost of living changes per year, and comparing to what we're seeing here in our own profession. And then, of course, it tapers down as we would expect to see when you get up to certain percentages. But still interesting to find over 10%, there's still 21 people that get some pretty significant raises, and I would like to know where they work. But in any event, let's go look at the salary freezes. Over 50% of responses indicated that didn't know if their salary would be frozen, and it seems like that's been a trend of year to year. You don't know what's going to happen, whether you will get the raise or if it will be frozen. But again, if you kind of take a look at the ones that reported, yes, it was, it is frozen. How long has it been frozen? And it's interesting that we still find some people have 2 to 4 years is obviously the highest mark, but there's still a good percentage of folks that's been 3 years plus that their salaries have been frozen. So interesting to see some of the responses that we've found with that, given what we are comparing that to. Now, some of these questions are new to this survey, so there really isn't an ability to do too much longitudinal look, but we will be using this as far as our analysis for the report as well. Really kind of goes back to the report that was done by the research committee, I believe it was last year, on the economic conditions and how that's impacted. So that report, I believe, is available online, and you could always benchmark that with some of the questions that we've asked that are associated with those things as well. So as I mentioned, we are getting close to the 10 of mark here, so I wanted to stop here. Again, this is not everything that you're going to see, and it was hard to decide what we wanted to include in this particular webinar, given that there is a lot of other descriptive information that we'll be sharing. But it's really nice to see some of the analysis and how it kind of either backs up some of the things that we know or think, but also some of the other information that we can glean from the DeepRel analysis. So what I'd like to do with the next 10 minutes that we've got left here, Rick and Bobby will be available to take questions. We'll be here, happy to answer any questions that you might have, and if we can't answer the questions, we certainly will get back to you, personally with regards to those. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to put myself on mute, and if you have a question, I believe maybe Marcus can just verify how to do this, but there is a question pod on the right here that you can certainly do. And what I'll do is try to kind of monitor that as well, and then Rick and Bobby, feel free to interject at any time.
All right, thanks, Josh, and Bobby and Rick. This was a great presentation. We have a couple of questions. I tried to make note of when they came in, so I'll do my best here. But the first question was, I believe it's related to the hypothesis 4 during Rick's section. Is that $11,000 less per year of experience? Was the question related to that slide?
So let me get to my notes here so I don't give any misinformation. So we're talking about the difference in gender, correct?
I believe that's there, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to scroll through I got two different documents open here because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just speaking from memory and I actually had the data in front of me. So give me just...
While you're looking, Rick, while you're looking, I can also throw in something. The Economic Impacts Survey was done in 2009, and at that point we came up with the findings that 69% of respondents indicated that their institution had frozen their salaries, and that 45% of respondents indicated that their institution had reduced the amount of staff. So given that that survey was done 4 years ago, and seeing that there are a lot of respondents saying that their salary has been frozen for 2+ years, and it's a significant number. So it does follow kind of what we had found 4 years ago, that the economy had made an impact on the field. And you can definitely go online and look at the 2009 Economic Impacts Report for more information.
Okay, so I'm on my notes now. So here's what I can tell you is it's just a difference of the means in with those particular variables. I can't tell you whether it's a function of experience or anything else, and so that's why we kind of had to do these independent analyses, and that's why Bobby did a stepwise regression model. That's just the difference for the people who responded to the survey. We know that experience, what you do, how long you do it, is going to affect your salary, but the t-test really doesn't allow you to make that distinction. What it will tell you is, based on the two groups that you're comparing, what those two groups come out to be. And so if we had a bigger sample, let's say we had a 100% census of NAGAP's membership, and every single member of NAGAP answered our survey, would we expect to see the same result? Statistically, what our findings are telling us is, yes, we are going to see this about 95 to 99% of the time. So that's a pretty important finding. And additional investigation is needed to determine precisely why it is that way. Why aren't females advancing? Why aren't females getting more leadership within their offices, within their institutions? And there's plenty of literature out there that can help us begin to frame that conversation. But in terms of this investigation, that really wasn't something that we were prepared to answer just yet. But your question certainly raises the issue that we need to look at it.
Okay, and the next question was for, I believe, Bobby's section in the predictors. Was consideration given to location in looking at predictors?
It was not. The one thing that we did struggle with at the beginning of this survey creation was, how would we be able to put things together to see, we put things on a map and kind of push pins on the map and see the number of people that we have. And that could be something that we want to do further analysis on. We thought that we had a lot of things to take a look at, but that could be further research for us to do, is to dig deeper and try and see if state was a factor. And let's say the individuals working in New York City, in the state of New York, or in the Chicagoland area, because cost of living is much higher in those areas than, let's say, suburban Toledo, Ohio, there might be a significant difference in salary based off of just the region. The one problem that does come along with taking a look at salary by state or by region is, how do you segment the data? Do you take a look at just respondents by state? Do you take a look at respondents by regional accreditation? So there's a lot of artificial judgments that you make in trying to segment those, but it is still a very good point, and we did not look at salary just based off of region.
Although I would add, I think Josh or Bobby, one of you touched on it earlier, when we looked at salary distribution based on institution located in an urban, suburban, or rural setting, we did try and look at that. So depending on how close you are to a city or how far you're away from it, if we plotted that out on a graph with rural being close to the y-axis, and then moved out rural, suburban, urban, we actually get a good linear relationship between the variables, with rural individuals earning less on average than suburban and then urban. but that wasn't a significant relationship, meaning it could have just been a fluke that we saw that. But it was an interesting finding. We tried to do it, but again, I think it's one of those things, like Bobby said, we struggled with in our design.
Okay, well, the next question is, would you recommend using this information to persuade your employer for a salary increase or to negotiate a salary for a job offer?
That's always been an interesting question. I know people who are in this profession who have taken this, the results from this salary survey and have gone to their supervisors and said, look, you know, the average salary of a director of graduate admissions at a private liberal arts institution with less than 1,000 graduate students is this, and my salary is off by $6,000 or, you know, let's say $10,000, and that's a significant difference. And some people have been able to negotiate, you know, a higher salary based off of that, but you do have to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, your institution may not have that much flexibility in the budget climate, and with the new fiscal year just around our bend, they may not be able to do anything, but I do know of individuals who have used this to persuade their institution that they need to reset their salary.
Right, and I would just, you know, add that, you know, this is one benchmark. Obviously, this benchmark holds a good amount of weight because it is your peers, but it's just like going to, you know, some of the other resources out there and trying to use that information. I think that this, because we have done some analysis behind it, you know, it is statistically correct and it is true, but it's like going to salary.com and trying to compare that information as well. I mean, I think you can successfully use it in a negotiation, but I wouldn't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket either. That would be the one thing that I've learned from experience as well.
And your human resources directors usually benchmark compensation based off of area colleges and what other schools in the area can offer, and if schools of your same size, research type. So there might be some limited application to what you can get out of your HR directors, because they've probably, or they should have, done some research on what that position should be able to command in the marketplace.
And I would say if you're going to use this survey, certainly wait till the report comes out, because there's going to be a lot of, obviously, some deeper analysis. So we gave you a cross-section of titles, but then we could even take that further and say titles associated with, you know, a title in a private and title versus public. And even though we haven't found a lot of differences, I mean, there are some things that you'll want to make sure to have in place to make it more applicable to your specific situation as well. Great questions. Thank you.
We've got one more for you that we can throw in. When you were looking at years of service, was that based on years in higher ed or based on graduate enrollment only?
There are two separate questions that ask how many years of experience you have in in the enrollment management profession. That was found to be a significant predictor. And there was a separate question on the number of years total that you have in all aspects of higher education, and that was found to be non-significant. So there are two separate variables in that.
And in my analysis, I specifically focused on the years of service in enrollment management, because that was found to be significant, and that was the more pertinent comparison to make.
Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any further questions at this point. So do you have anything closing that you'd like to throw in there, Josh?
Just, you know, the one thing that I think is a really big important takeaway with anything that we do here is, you know, and it actually goes back to the end. The last question we asked in the survey is, you know, give us your thoughts and give us your feedback. This, you know, the work that we do, the volunteer work here, is really for you, it's for us, for the members. You know, as we work on preparing the report, don't be afraid to bring forward any thoughts or ideas that you think would be helpful. I mean, we definitely will take everything seriously that folks bring forward to us. You know, all of our contact information is on the NAGAP website. I think that as we take, you know, what we've learned from preparing for this, as well as the notes, the many notes of further analysis that we have to do as we prepare the report, you know, just keep in mind, you know, that we are here for you, and you're welcome to get in touch with any one of the committee members as we move forward to finalizing this. So, but I do thank you all for carving out some time to attend, you know, and hopefully we'll have a chance to connect with you on future research projects as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh, Rick, and Bobby, for all of your insights and all your hard work on this project. I know everybody really appreciates what you're putting into this, and certainly we look forward to the final report. For those of you who attended today, please look forward to your email. We'll be sending an email out to you with a brief survey as usual, just to ask your feedback about the webinars and what you'd like to see from us in the future. And again, we really really appreciate your support of NAGAP and our webinar efforts going forward. So thanks so much for your time and have a great day.